So motivating students is a challenge across the field of education. Teachers face this problem every day, every year that they enter their classroom. What is helpful to a teacher is when they are able to identify the degree to which their students are motivated or not motivated. Ways to motivate your students include creating lessons that your students find relevant and sharing personal experiences from your life and creating an environment where your students feel comfortable enough to share their experiences and their opinions. While it's important for any student to find relevancy in your lessons, it's even more important that low-performing students find relevancy within the lessons because they need to feel that what they're learning in the classroom matters to their real lives. Previous research has been done, but not enough research existed to support ideas of motivating low-performing, low socioeconomic students. Previous research done by Crumpton and Gregory, they did a study where they used intrinsic motivation on academic achievement. They needed to see how intrinsically motivating students helped their academic achievement. They found that students who found school relevant to their lives had higher motivation, and students that had high levels of motivation were more likely to be engaged in class. In another study by Reeves, Corley, and Orpinas, they studied 11th grade students that had high levels of aggression. These students were very much like the students that I used in my own study, and they found that the ways to interpret their high and low motivation was directly related to whether or not the students were graduating. In another study by Carrara, Wachanga, and Aurora, they hope to find a difference in using graphic organizers like a concept map in a biology classroom. So they studied two different teachers, one that used the graphic organizer and one that did not use the graphic organizer. Their hypothesis stated that there would be a difference found in students that were able to use a graphic organizer and the ones that were not using the graphic organizer. They taught for 4 weeks using the graphic organizer and a control group that did not use the graphic organizer. And they showed that there was no significant difference in the motivation between the two genders that were used in the study. But the students that used the graphic organizer had higher levels of achievement at the end of the semester. In another study by Mason Hong Kong, they studied the effect of adventure learning on student success in the classroom. So the teacher used his own trip that he took to Mount Kilimanjaro. He incorporated it into his lessons, and they studied how it affected their student results at the end of the year. And the students that were exposed to the adventure learning were had more significantly higher scores at the end of the semester than those students that were not exposed to them. In a study by David Page, he studied African American 6th and 7th graders that were classified as struggling readers. At the end of his study, he found that students that had greater oral reading proficiency and greater reading comprehension had higher motivation in the classroom. A study by Taylor and Graham in 2007, they studied to determine whether or not student achievement in minority groups differed from those not in minority groups. The students ranked their peers in a class survey based on who they admired, who they respected, and who they wanted to be like. The results found that the low-performing African American and Latina girls value their high-achieving peers. So they focused on people that were successful in their classroom. The 2nd and 4th grade minority boys also value these high-achieving peers. However, this value decreased with age, and they found that the seventh grade African American boys, low performing, did not value their high achieving peers as much as the rest of the students. In a study by Hart and Sullivan, the researchers studied the students and the teachers' perceptions of motivation. So they wanted to find how teachers were able to perceive whether their students were motivated or not. They found that teachers that were internally focused, so they focused on what was going on inside, were more effectively able to influence their students. In another study by Pickens and Eek, they observed two different teaching methods in an AP biology class and a general biology class. One of the teachers used more structured teaching while the other one used different, more like group work, class dialogue, things like that. And they studied the difference that it had on the effects of student grades. So based on the previous research, there's a gap in finding the specific things that motivate different students, specifically students of low socioeconomic status. So the purpose of this new study was to find whether or not intrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation had any effect on student achievement in the low socioeconomic class of students. The hypothesis of the new study was that specific intrinsic and extrinsic motivation would increase their academic achievement. The study included 99 English 3 students. 85% were black, 14% were Caucasian, and less than 1% were of another race. The age range was 15 to 21 years old. And most importantly, in this study, 90% of the students were considered low socioeconomic status. The experimental design, it was an experimental study because there was an experimental group and a control group. The independent variable is the motivating factors, the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation that was implemented into the classrooms, and the dependent variable was the final grades. You can open it. Final grades, they were documented throughout the, just put it down.
Okay.
Final grades were documented throughout the 9 weeks. So I documented the grades at the beginning of the 9 weeks and the end of the 9 weeks and measured any changes that were made throughout. And a tally sheet is what kept track of the motivation used in the classroom. The procedure, I documented the grades, like I said, and then for the experimental group, motivation was specifically planned and planted into the different lessons. And for the control group, I just taught like normal, and it was naturally occurring motivation. The assessments that were used to calculate the final grades are all aligned with Common Core state standards, and the parish-wide grading system is what calculated them. So the average number of each letter of the grade book, so A, B, C, D, or F, were calculated at the end of the 9 weeks, and the average number of each grade was, the average number of each grade was calculated at the end of the semester. So academic achievement in this study is calculated by at least one increasing point in the grade. For the results, there showed no significance, there was a significance in the results. So this shows us that the changing in the grades was not due to chance alone. So the motivation did have an impact on the students. In the control group, however, their grades increased more often than in the experimental group, but there was significant growth in the experimental group. So this shows that in the control group, the more naturally occurring motivating factors probably had more of an impact on student growth. For extrinsic motivation, I use things like bonus points, stickers on assessments, and these things did not seem to have effect on the students. They were uninterested in bonus points for the most part. Parent communication was difficult because a lot of phones were not connected, wrong numbers, things like that. I had about one parent that would actually answer every week. So parent contact was not effective. Students did like the stickers, and there was an A wall where every time they made an A, their name was placed on the wall, and students did seem to be interested in that. So the extrinsic motivation had less of an impact than the intrinsic motivation. For intrinsic motivation, I would publicly praise the students. Anytime they would come into the classroom, I would update the class as a whole as to how many students' grades had increased or how many A's were scored in the previous day or the previous week, and this seemed to have a positive impact on the students. In the control group, there was, like I said before, more naturally occurring motivation, so this seemed to create more of a natural environment for the students. 83.33% of the control group students increased their scores by the end of the 9 weeks. Something else that was found was that students who already had high achieving grades, so an A or a B, increased more significantly than those that were not. However, 74% of students that had a C or below increased their grades by the end of the semester. So to generalize these results, they can be generalized to my coworkers because they teach the same demographics. And the practical implications are to motivate your students, is to use motivation, whether they're planned or not planned, but getting to know your students and thinking of ways that you can motivate them, especially the low socioeconomic students, to hopefully increase their academic performance. Are there any questions?
How do you think the naturally occurring motivations in the plan change the environment?
I think that because they were naturally occurring, the students probably felt more comfortable, and that maybe sometimes in the experimental group the motivators were maybe more forced, and maybe the students could tell that something was different.
Was it difficult not to implement natural occurring motivators into the experimental group?
Yes, and I think that that did have an effect on the study. Not being able to naturally motivate is difficult for a teacher that is used to motivating their students. So having planned things that you had to do was difficult.
Do you think it is possible for future studies to not use any motivation in a control group?
I think that it would be very difficult. I think that a better option would be to just observe different teachers and observe their different motivation styles and focus your experiment on that.
Do you think different classifications of students would react differently to alternate motivators?
Yes, I do. I think high-performing students would be more motivated by extrinsic factors because most high-performing students are already intrinsically motivated.
So do you think teachers of non-low SES students could benefit from these results?
I do think that other teachers of low socioeconomic students can benefit from this because it shows us that these students do need to be motivated and that the teacher should be the one to do that. Anything else? Thank you.